This man-eating crocodile story begins with a man named Simalungun, who was a fierce Iban warrior. He was feared by his enemies along the Skrang River in Sarawak, a state of Malaysia that occupies the northwestern part of Borneo. He took out many of his enemies on headhunting trips and was so fearsome that people believed he was invincible. To prove or disprove this, Simalungun's enemies kidnapped his wife to lure him to Batang Lupar. When he came to rescue his beloved wife, they would find out if he really was the invincible man he appeared to be. Simalungun successfully rescued his wife and avoided death himself, but moments later, as they were running away, one of the enemies threw a spear. It struck Simalungun's wife in the chest, and she died. Simalungun was enraged and chased the perpetrators all the way to the Batang Lupar River. But unbeknownst to Simalungun, the water was his weakness, and he was speared through the heart. His body and that of his wife were left on the riverbank. As the water rose, it engulfed the couple, and they were dragged out into the river, never to be seen again. One of Simalungun's relatives was a very powerful shaman, and he searched high and low for his lost family. Then, one night, he had a dream. In that dream, Simalungun told him that he wanted revenge on the people who killed him and his wife. He wanted to rain terror over them and their future generations. The shaman ventured down to the river where Simalungun had breathed his last breath, and he summoned the power of the Iban gods. He reincarnated Simalungun in the form of a white-backed crocodile so that he could prey on his victims from the murky river. And that's what he did. His new name was Bujang Senang. Nobody knows for sure how many victims succumbed to the barbaric attacks of the reincarnated Simalungun, but it all began with Banang Anak Pali, the first of the recorded attacks. He was a respected young man of Sri Aman, and in just 2 days' time was to be officially sworn in as head of the Longhouse. He would attend a ceremony with the local community, a great achievement that would make his family proud. But sadly, he would never achieve that status. He was fishing for prawns in the Batang Lupar River with his brother Kibir. It was midday, and the sun was high in the sky. Its reflection shined and shimmered off the water's surface, and the two brothers shielded their eyes from the glare. As they scooped out the prawns and emptied them into their baskets on the riverbank, something moved under the water towards them. It was Bujang Senang, the white-backed crocodile. He gently moved his tail from side to side, propelling himself forwards against the current. He had sensed the vibrations from the two fishermen and moved in to investigate. Kibir thought that they had made a good catch and stepped out of the water. He called to his brother to follow him and finish for the day. But Bangan was insistent on catching a few more. The crocodile was now right beside Bangan's feet, but he was completely oblivious. Able to hold their breath for more than an hour, the crocodile was the master of staying hidden. He lay on the muddy bottom of the river, just inches from Bangan, not moving a muscle, just waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Just then, Kibir saw a kingfisher flitting past. It dipped and darted just above the surface of the water, its bright feathers shimmering in the sunlight. Then it was gone in an instant. Kibir felt a shudder down his spine. A kingfisher was a bad omen. A terrible feeling came over him, and he yelled at his brother to get out of the water immediately. He felt an imminent sense of danger, and he was right. As Bangan heeded his brother's warning and headed for the bank, his bare foot landed on something knobbly and hard. He looked down, but the water was so murky he couldn't see what he had stepped on. He looked up at his brother and called out, "What is this thing, a log?" But it was no log. It was Bujang Senang, seeking his revenge. A split second later, and Kibir watched in horror as an enormous crocodile erupted out of the water and secured Bangan in its jaws. The water frothed and foamed with the commotion, and Bangan disappeared beneath the surface of the river. Kibir screamed at the water, rushing in himself. Moments later, the deadly crocodile reappeared with a limp Bangan in its mouth. Its head was enormous. Its back bore a thick white stripe along it. Kibir leapt onto the crocodile and managed to grab hold of its tail. But when the crocodile pulled away, its tail slipped out of Kibir's grasp and disappeared into the depths once more. A search ensued, with no trace of either the crocodile or Kibur's brother. The police and the Department of Wildlife and National Parks joined in the desperate search, and after 5 days, the top half of Bongon's body was found. There were no sightings of the white crocodile or Bongon's other half. The attacks by the 20-foot saltwater crocodile began in 1941. During the early decades of its reign, records weren't kept of the number of victims that fell prey to its powerful jaws. But between just 1982 and 1992, there were 13 recorded deaths. The final victim was a young girl called Dayang Anak Bayang, who was walking beside the Palaban River. She and her mother were heading to their paddy field to work. It was late afternoon, the sun was dropping in the sky, and dusk was setting in. But the pair didn't know that they were walking closer and closer to the infamous croc. Bujang Sanang was lying in wait. He patrolled 2 rivers in the region, and this evening he had decided to search for food in the Palaban River. As the mother and daughter duo arrived near their paddy field, Dayang turned to help her mother up the slippery riverbank. They were standing just inches from the most feared jaws in the region. As Dayang turned to follow her mother up the bank, the crocodile leapt out of the water and dragged her in. Dayang let out an ear-piercing scream that reverberated across the open paddy fields. Her mother wheeled around just in time to see her daughter pulled underwater. Dayang's eyes were bulging with terror, and she held out her arms to her mother, a desperate call for help in her final seconds. Bujang Sanang had struck again. Dayang's brother, Enye, and cousin Sidi Imam heard the cries for help and rushed across the fields towards the river. When they arrived, Dayang was nowhere to be seen. Only her distraught mother was on the riverbank, screaming Dayang's name. The water's surface had returned to normal. There was no sign that anything had ever happened, only the traumatizing sight of her daughter being dragged away etched into the mother's mind. Enye and Sidi began reciting a locator spell, and 2 hours later they found Dayang's body. But they weren't going to stop there. The crocodile had caused too much pain and suffering to the local people. It was time that they ended his reign of terror once and for all. They recited another locator spell as they hunted for the white-backed predator. Stomping through the water and along the riverbank, armed with spears and guns, the group of locals searched high and low for the elusive beast. The water began receding, and with it, Bujang Sanang began moving downstream with the current. But there was a large log in the way, blocking his route. That's when Enye and the others spotted him, his enormous head and characteristic white stripe. It was no mistaking this crocodile. They threw a spear at the crocodile's head, and incredibly, the spear just broke in 2. Maybe just like its human warrior form, this crocodile was invincible too. Those with guns pulled the triggers again and again, but the beast would not die. The men ventured into the river where Bujang Sanang was trapped and stabbed him with spears. The crocodile's tough hide was finally succumbing to the ferocious onslaught. In one final bout of defiance, Bujang Sanang reared up out of the water, hissed loudly, and opened his jaws wide. The men seized the opportunity and released multiple shots into the great crocodile's mouth. Bujang Sanang fell back into the water, thrashed about, and then was still. The great crocodile, a menacing legend for more than 5 decades, was finally killed on May 12, 1992. They carried the 12-foot reptile back to the longhouse, a trip that took them 4 hours. When they lay him on the ground, it was clear to see just how enormous the crocodile was. His long white stripe along his back was clearly visible. The size of his jaws and head were immense. It had taken 40 shots of 10-centimeter nails to bring down the legend. He is immortalized in the Zhang's crocodile farm Sarawak, where his skull lies on display in a glass cabinet for all to see. Keeping the legend of Bujang Sanang alive, and along with him, his 13 recorded victims he brought to their terrifying final affliction.